Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. Welcome back to the Domtrap. I'm your host, your editor, director, producer, creator, your first, your last, and your everything. I go by the name of Dom, and welcome to the podcast. I know it's been a few months or so, a couple of months, but no biggie. We're here, we've arrived. I have seen many films in the past several months, so I think I got a plan to kind of stretch these out, but I have to talk about the elephant in the room when it comes to film right now. And as you can see by my hoodie, if you're watching this on YouTube, if not, make sure you go and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Yes, we will be talking about Deadpool today. And I'm still, as I'm recording, debating on if I want to do a spoiler review or a spoiler-free review. I'm teetering on spoiler review, but I'll give you a heads up if you want to avoid spoilers. But yes, I believe that this might be the movie of the summer. I truly believe that. And I've thought that for a while. As soon as it even got announced, I kind of was on the fence of like, this might be the biggest movie of the year. But, we'll see. We still have some time. We still have some absolute heaters to come to our eyes. So very much looking forward to everything that's coming out, just like I was looking forward to this film being released. But let's do our check-in. I hope that each and every last one of you are doing well. Shout out to everybody. Shout out to Hailey. Shout out to Lynn. Congrats, bro. Congrats, Lynn. Shout out to Lex. Hope that all is well. You and your beautiful baby boys. Shout out to Jazz, Angelica. Shout out to everybody. Shout out to Greg. Shout out to James. Well, yeah, shout out to James. We'll talk later, man. We'll talk later. But yeah, shout out to everybody for checking in and supporting the pod and asking where the episodes are. Ricky, I see you. I figured it's time. It's always time, but yeah, it's time. But welcome. For the past several weeks or so, everything's been good. I don't really have too many complaints at all. Life is going as life should. We just have to keep going. That's pretty much all it is. That's really all it comes down to, is that we just have to kind of be strong for ourselves and be strong for others and just keep pushing through this thing that we were just kind of thrown into. So if you're listening out there, just know that you are not alone. You can get through this. You're stronger than what you think you are. And yeah, don't live by fear. Please do not live by fear, because that will be the undoing of everything that you kind of set up for yourself. I feel like fear and being afraid is something that we kind of steer away from, but I think it's okay that we live, to fear. I think that's just human nature. We just live to fear, but it's up to us whether we let that fear run or ruin our relationships with people, or just destroy everything. I think there's always a time that you have to kind of just sit back and face your fears with action, not with words, not with thoughts, but with actual action. You have to take some kind of action to get over that fear. And yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to give y'all a little TED talk, but yeah, here we are. But this episode, I do want to do a few reviews here. I want to start off with a movie that I didn't know much about going into it. Absolutely knew nothing about it going into it. I actually decided to not even watch any trailers or anything. But it's a film. It very much is like what you would expect from a YouTube short horror film, but just in long form. But this film goes by the name of Oddity. Now, Oddity is about how do I explain this movie? Oddity is about a shopkeeper who is blind. Her sister had been murdered, and she wants to figure out how, why, and who did the murder, right? So we don't really get to see the sister much. We get to see the sister in a state of panic, because the movie starts off with the sister making a phone call to the shopkeeper that we know, the blind sister. That's what I'll just call her. I don't really remember the name, so you just have to bear with me. Actually, I think it'd be a good idea if I look this up. But okay, so the blonde sister's name is Darcy, right? And the sister that can see, her name is Danny. Okay. And Danny is married to a Dr. Ted Timmis. He's a psychiatrist. So Danny makes a phone call to someone that we don't know, and she says, "We are connected." And we just kind of have to do with that what we will. Danny then gets an unexpected visitor in the form of a man with a glass eye. He's very manic. He's telling her that someone is in her home. She needs to get out. He's basically just trying to save her, but he's in such a shape that you can tell something's not right with him. Danny proceeds to ask the man, "Hey, are you one of my husband's patients?" And he says, "Yes, I know your husband is at home because he works nights." And Danny is, of course, she's freaked out, so she decides to not let the man in that's actually trying to save her life, or so we think. So Danny leaves the guy alone. He leaves, and she keeps hearing things in the background, and there are also these little visual clues, like they'll show a wide shot and you'll think that you're looking at something, but it could possibly be something, but you're not completely sure because the camera pans away and then like a loud noise is heard. So Danny's rightfully freaked out. And then we just kind of cut to the future, basically. And this is where we meet Darcy, her blind twin sister. And we learn that Danny was actually killed that night. How? We're not quite sure. Why? We're not sure. But Danny's husband, Ted Timmis, Dr. Timmis, goes to the shop to go and see the sister to basically, I don't know if he's just there to pay his respects or what, but he's there. And Darcy works at this, I think it's called an oddity shop. I think that's actually where the movie gets its title from. But she works at this oddity shop where there's just a bunch of like haunted items that just kind of lay around and sit there. And she tells the story about how someone came and stole one of the items and brought it back once they realized that it was actually haunted. She proceeds to tell the story about a bell. There's a bell that if someone rings it, the doorkeep at some old hotel would come and kill whoever rings the bell. And of course, Dr. Timmis is a doctor, so he thinks that it's a load of baloney. And he eventually leaves. So not too long afterwards, he thinks that he invited Darcy to his home where he and Danny lived. Darcy gets there and she meets Dr. Timmis's new girlfriend. And I don't remember how long it's been, but I don't think that it was actually too long from the time that Dr. Timmis had lost his wife, Danny. But she Darcy actually shows up to the house and she has this box. What's in this box? We don't know yet. They don't know yet. So she shows up and she's like, "Oh, you invited me to this house. That's why I'm here." And Dr. Timmis is like, "Okay, come in, but I'm about to go to work and my girlfriend has to go out to the city, but you're welcome to come in." The girlfriend is understandably reluctant to this and she's just kind of on edge about it, but she comes in, she has the box, she sets the box down. Well, I think the box might have been delivered, I'm not quite sure. It's kind of weird, right? So within the box, there's this wooden mannequin inside of it. We don't really get a good look at it until they take it out. But it's just this creepy, human-like wooden figure of a human being that they eventually just sit in a chair that just sits there for just about the entirety of the runtime. And it's just creepy. It just sits there and you just always see it in the back, or you just know it's there. It moves suddenly. You don't know why it moves. You don't know why it's there. But Darcy eventually talks to Dr. Timmis's girlfriend and is like, "Hey, do you know anything about my sister?" she's like, yeah, kind of, sort of. I've seen photos and videos, and she seemed like a nice lady. I'm sorry about what happened to her. And Darcy is just very weird about the entire conversation. And then she eventually gets to the point where she's like, I think I just want to stay the night. And Dr. Timmis's girlfriend is like, okay, just don't be weird. And she loses her key. She loses her keys, in quotes. She loses her keys. So she can't really leave the way that she thought that she would. So now she has to stay in this home with this wooden figure sitting at their kitchen table with this blonde lady that she's never met. And Darcy falls asleep in one scene, right? Dr. Timmis's girlfriend, Yana, I believe her name is. Yana decides to go and mess with the doll. She finds like some tongues, puts them in the back of the doll's head, and pulls out these like items. And she's just looking at them. And one of the items is a picture of Darcy and Danny from when they were younger. One item is a vial of blood. One of them is like a lock of hair. These very weird and personal items are inside of this doll's head, this mannequin's head. So of course she's freaked out, and she gets caught. She actually gets caught by Darcy, who yells at her and says, "Put those back." And she just kind of puts them back one by one. Yana eventually just kind of freaks out, and she goes upstairs and tries to go to bed, where she finds Danny's camera. And she's just kind of going through the pictures, and I think the camera's actually taking pictures of its own. It's just a bunch of weird stuff happening in the house. And Yana, like anyone would be, is freaked out. She gets her keys that are inside of the crate that the mannequin came in. She gets the keys and she just dips, like just leaves. So now Darcy is just there in the house, right? Dr. Timmis comes home from his shift, or like halfway through his shift, and he finds Darcy upstairs just like sitting down on the wall. And Darcy just kind of says to him, "I know you killed my sister." And Dr. Timmis is like, "What? No, I didn't kill your sister. What do you mean?" And she discovers that the man that she thought killed Danny, the man with the glass eye that showed up before, was really actually trying to help Danny. That man had died in the in the psych ward. He was brutally murdered, his head crushed. There was one of the other patients that witnessed it, but he's kind of crazy, so you can't really take his words, as truth. You just hear these weird noises, and you're trying to figure out what that weird noise is. It's like something wooden and something is just croaking and just loud noises, and then you hear blood splash because the man's head is like bashed in. So Darcy is like, "Okay, I know it was you." And Dr. Timmis is like, "Okay, we'll figure this out in the morning. I'm going to leave my phone here. I'm going to call you if I need you. Just come to the phone if you need it." Little do we know, and little does Darcy know, he set the phone on the other side of a hole in the floor that's upstairs. So he gets to work and he calls his phone, and we believe that Darcy might figure out that there's a hole in the floor, but no, she's blind. Sorry. She gets up, she tries to get to the phone, and yeah, she falls through the floor because she cannot see. So we learn that Dr. Timmis has a coworker who he kind of persuaded to kill Danny. We learned that he actually did get Danny killed, and now he wants the same guy to go to his house to finish the job with Darcy. So his coworker gets to the house. He's looking around. He finds Darcy on the floor. He goes upstairs. He sees the camera. He gets spooked by Danny's apparition or ghost or whatever. And he goes back downstairs. No, actually, I can't remember if he falls to the floor or not, but he gets injured. But then we learn that Darcy is actually still alive, and she uses her powers of, I guess, apparitioning to control the mannequin, the wooden mannequin. And that's how we learned that the guy from before had been killed. She controlled the mannequin to go to the psych ward to kill the man. So she basically controls this mannequin and chokes the guy that's come to kill her and finish the job only for her to die. She succumbs to her wounds, and she is not able to kill her sister's killer. So the police arrive. They arrest the man. They send him to the psych ward where Dr. Timmis works. So Dr. Timmis is like talking to the guy. He's like, okay, so you're telling me that you saw and heard a wooden mannequin and he picked you up and you don't know what else happened? And the guy's like, yeah, that's exactly what happened. I'm not going to tell anyone that you tried to get me to kill your wife. I'm not going to tell anybody anything. And Dr. Timmis is like, okay, we'll see about that. And just kind of leaves him in there, and also leaves like another patient to come and mess with him. And he like goes in there and like bites his big toe. It's weird. It gets weird. But Dr. Timmis does tell, his coworker, like, yes, this is exactly what happened. I got home, I found the wooden figure and I burned it, so it's not alive anymore. And she's dead and nothing's going to happen to me because I'm a doctor and I'm okay. And he's just a bad guy overall. We just learn. So Dr. Timmis goes back home because he's crazy, right? He's calling his girlfriend and she's just like leaving him voicemails like, hey, I don't want anything to do with you. I'm out of town. I'm not coming back. It's over. You keep going back to that creepy house, blah, 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 blah. So Dr. Timmis comes home and he finds the bell that we mentioned before about the bellhop that is angry and wants to kill whoever rings the bell. So he opens the package, he looks at the bell, he sets it on the table, and he just kind of looks at it for a few moments, and he rings the bell. And what happens? Nothing. Absolutely nothing happens. But only for a little while, because we learn that the story about the bellhop is true, and we see the ghostly dead figure of the bellhop behind Dr. Timmis, and then the movie cuts to black. Now, if this were a 15 to 20 minute short film on YouTube, this would be great. But this movie is an hour, it's a little bit over an hour and a half. It's very slow. It takes a lot of time to get to its point, but it's rough to stick with at certain times. I found myself getting bored. My mind was wandering. Sometimes I wished I was watching a different movie, but overall, it's not a bad film. For a movie which I'm sure has a very low budget, it did pretty well in the box office, I believe. I think it made $1 million. It also premiered at South by Southwest, where it got the Audience Award, I believe. But people apparently love this movie. It is, I think it was shot in Ireland, so it does have a lot of Irish accents that you kind of have to get your ears adjusted to. But when it comes to this movie, it's odd. I'm sorry that I gave the entire premise away, but I believe it had a short and limited release anyway. But it just took forever to get to the point. It was very slow. The scariest moments were with the mannequin, because it's just admittedly a creepy design, which I'm not mad at. But when you show me something for so long only for it not to do much, it stings a bit. I would have loved to have seen it do more than what it did, besides stand up, walk around, make creepy faces, move around when others aren't looking at it. If it did a little bit more than that, I could possibly recommend the movie to everyone, but as of right now, I can't. If you're a horror fan, definitely check this movie out, but if not, steer clear. You might not get much out of it. But yes, I do like the kind of tug and pull that it gave with us trying to figure out Danny's death and what happened to her. Just for us to figure out that she stayed in a tent at their home. Dr. Timmis was just kind of tired of her, so he got his coworker to kill her instead of just like breaking it off with her, because he tells his coworker, who asks, he's like, hey, why don't you just tell her that you don't want to be with her anymore? And Dr. Timmis' response is, she loves me too much. And that's just toxic. I'm sorry. That is just a toxic statement to make. And to actually go through a plan of killing your wife because she loves you too much and you're too chicken to just break it off with her. You poor excuse of a human being and a man. I'm sorry. But yeah, he kind of got what was coming to him. It just took forever to get to that point. But if I had to give this movie a score, I'd give this one a 6 out of 10. Just off of the strength that it had a few things going for it. I was actually curious I don't know about everyone else, but one of my favorite tropes with twins in films is when the twin is played by the same character. I absolutely love it. But yes, this movie's a strong 6 out of 10. But check it out. Like I said, if you're a fan of horror, dude, just watch it. But this next film I'm going to talk about is something that's definitely more of my speed. So if anyone knows me, you know that I don't know how to put this, but when it comes to elderly women, I believe that they should be protected at all costs. And such is the case with this film. And this film is called Thelma. I don't know if many of you have heard about this film, but essentially, just a short synopsis. I think I spent a lot of time talking about Oddity, but a short synopsis of this film is that this sweet 90-something-year-old lady gets scammed of $1,000. I'm sorry, $10,000. She gets scammed for $10,000 by someone using an AI filtered voice of her grandson. And she pays them because she thinks that her grandson is in trouble, only to find out that her grandson was never in trouble. Her grandson is also kind of a burnout, but he loves his grandma. So she decides to go on this adventure to get her money back using the small clues, like the place where she dropped the money off, and she just kind of figures it out along the way. This film actually also stars, I'm just going to say it. It stars June Squibb, and it also stars Richard Roundtree, and I believe that this is his final role before he passed away last year. So rest in peace to Richard Roundtree, our good man, Shaft. And yeah, she's an elderly lady. She's very sweet, like most old ladies are, and she unknowingly gives them the money, and she tries to figure everything out. She has her daughter, who's married, and she has the grandson, of course. And she's telling them about what happened. They're confused. They want to just go to the police and let the police figure it out. But she's like, no, I need to do this on my own. I gave them the money. I can have them give me the money back. So she goes on this adventure. She meets up with Richard Roundtree's character, who is another elderly gentleman, of course. And he's in a nursing home. Thelma lives alone in her home. So she comes to terms of like, that everyone is getting older around her, and she doesn't quite know how to cope with it. There comes a scene in this movie where she's reaching out to different people, and she's calling their phones, and they're like children and grandchildren are picking up saying, oh yeah, so-and-so passed away, so-and-so is in the nursing home, so-and-so is in hospice care. And it's just, she's kind of freaking out because she's like, I don't have anyone. So she calls him, and she comes up with this plan to use his scooter to get around and escape her family so they don't have to stress about her, which of course leads them to stressing more. So she eventually does steal his scooter. He catches up to her and says, the only way I'll let you take my scooter is if I go on this adventure with you. She says, fine. So they go on this adventure to get the money back. And it's this one scene, where they meet up with one of their old friends because they know that she has a gun and they need protection because they're old. So they get to this lady's house, and this poor lady has some form of Alzheimer's or dementia, and she remembers them, she sees them, but she doesn't have a clue about what's going on in the world. Richard Roundtree's character, Ben, he sits down with her and he's just kind of talking to her to distract her while Thelma goes upstairs and finds the gun. And he's just kind of looking around, and there's food everywhere, and there's roaches, and he can just tell that she's not in the right mind and that she needs help. But Thelma's upstairs trying to get the gun. The gun eventually goes off, and their friend has no idea what's happening still. They eventually leave, and then Thelma and Ben are having this conversation like, hey, we're all gonna be out of here soon. We should live our life the way that we should live it. And Thelma's like, no, I have my home. I need to be home. I don't need to go to a nursing home. They have a little bit of an argument, only for his bike to get run over by someone that was just not paying attention to the road. So his scooter's out of the way. So now she decides that she's not going to go back to the nursing home or go back to her family. She's going to actually go and try to get this money back. So she walks away and she falls And oh my goodness, this scene, it really hit close to home because my grandmother, rest in peace, she suffered a fall not too long before she passed away. So seeing that scene really, it hit way different than I thought it would. But she's just kind of laying on the ground, and Ben, he eventually comes back and finds her, picks her up, and he's like, you know what? Life is too short for us to be bickering over this. Let's go and get your money back. So they go and they eventually find the address. They find where they got scammed, and we find an elderly gentleman. Well, first we find a young gentleman, and he goes to the P.O. box. He picks something up. They follow him to this other place, and he goes into this antique shop. And they're like, okay, the money's in there. Everything we need is in there. The young fella's in there. Whoever's scamming us is in there. We need to go in there and get the money back. So she goes in there alone, and she finds the young man and his grandfather, who's played by Malcolm McDowell, which I had no idea that he was even in this film. It's always good to see Malcolm McDowell. Malcolm McDowell. I'm sorry, but it's always good to see him. I remember seeing him in Wanted. That was the last time I saw him. But great actor. But yeah, so she's talking to him, and he's like, hey, I need money to keep my store running. My grandson is helping me. And looking at that contrast between him and his grandson versus Thelma and her grandson, it's like they're really a big part of their grandchildren's lives and kind of shape out who they are and who they want to be as human beings in the future. So she's like, you know what? I've had it. I need my money back. She pulls the gun out on him. She pulls the gun out on him, and he's like, you're not going to shoot me. You're not getting your money back. He's just really just standing on this like, hey, I have health issues. I want to save my shop. We need the money. We're not giving it to you. They eventually struggle over the gun, and then Ben comes in and saves the day. Again, shout out to Ben. He's really the saving grace for this movie in more ways than none. But they eventually, so she doesn't know how to use computers because she's an old lady. So she calls her son, who's kind of walking her through and teaching her how to use the computer and how to exit out of ads and such. So he's just telling her, hey, do you see that X? You may not see it, at the top right, maybe at the top left, or at the bottom somewhere. Just look for the small X and click on it. And it's this really kind of climactic scene of him just kind of walking her through it. It's really well shot, by the way, too. But she eventually does get her $10,000 back. And she kind of tells the elderly gentleman, Malcolm McDowell's character, you should be nicer to your grandson. You should not call him an idiot or dumb. He called his grandson something. And they eventually just leave. And her grandson comes in and picks them up and takes them back to the nursing home. And she, of course, they reunite with family and everything. And she's very thankful that she has a family and a support system because, she's seen one of her friends that does not have that. And she grows to have an appreciation for Ben, of course, because he saved her life. And then also for nursing homes. And she's like, it's not so bad. And then everyone just kind of leaves. And then also the kind of side plot with the grandson is that, he is a little bit of a burnout. He has anxiety. And, it's about how the Gen Xers don't really understand that. And he's trying to explain to them like, hey, I want to get a job, but I can't because of this reason. And they just don't understand it. It's like he's talking to a brick wall all the time. But they eventually respect him because he kind of went out and saved his grandmother, and he makes the bold decision to call his ex-girlfriend and say, hey, I'm going to do better, which is a big move. So shout out to the grandson. 3 claps to that man. But at the end of this movie, there's a scene where the grandson and Thelma are driving. Well, he's driving and she's just in the car. And she's talking about how old some of the palm trees are around her and how messed up the roots look, but the trees are still standing. They're still growing. And then after that, it kind of cuts to black. The credits start rolling and we see an actual scene with the director talking to his grandmother, having the exact same conversation. So I don't know if this movie is actually based on a true story, but it seems like this film is definitely a love letter to the director, to his grandmother. And overall, it's a really sweet tale. It's probably one of my favorite movies that I've seen this year, just off the strength of me not knowing much about it, going to see it and then loving it overall. But I'd have to give this film an 8 out of 10. This movie is really good. I have a strong appreciation for films like this that aren't really conventional, that just tell a story to have it and keep me entertained throughout. There wasn't a single moment where I was just kind of checked out and was waiting on the next scene. I was always worried about what was going to happen to this old lady and if she was going to get her money back. So if you like movies with heart at all, I can easily recommend this one to you. But yes, again, this film is called Thelma. Please go and check it out. Support the director. Yeah. Now, I think it's time that I get to what I think most people might be waiting for, or waiting for me to talk about. And I've come to the conclusion that I will do a spoiler review, which I know might be a little bit new to the channel. So if you don't want to get spoiled by Deadpool and Wolverine, go away now. Come back a little bit later to hear me kind of outro the pod. But yes, I'm going to talk about Deadpool and Wolverine. I have to talk about this film. Lex, if you're still listening, man, I can't believe you reviewed this movie without me. But you know, it's all good. It's all good. But yes, this is what I believe is the movie of the summer. Everyone was kind of waiting on this movie. Everyone was waiting to see what Marvel was going to do next, what Ryan Reynolds was going to do next with the character, who was going to be in this movie, what Hugh Jackman was going to do, being back as Wolverine after telling us that he would not be back as Wolverine after Logan. There was a lot riding on this movie. When I saw the first trailer, I was a little bit worried, but not by a lot. I was just kind of curious to see what they even were what story was even trying to be painted here. But you know, they kind of explained it in the trailer. They said, hey, Deadpool is to be Marvel Jesus, Marvel H Christ. But is that what we got? Did we get Deadpool being Marvel Jesus? Absolutely not. But what we did get is a really fun summertime flick that happens to be an MCU movie. Now, when it comes to the Deadpool films, I have a bit of a good relationship with. I really enjoyed the first movie. The second, not as much, but I was happy to see some of the cameos that took place. And knowing that this film was going to be more of that, I wasn't upset. I knew what I was getting myself into. I knew to kind of turn my brain off prior to watching this movie, because this is not a movie where you think. It's definitely not. This movie, more than anything, is a love letter to the Fox Studios franchise of Marvel films. So your likes of the X-Men franchise and Blade and Elektra, Daredevil, and things of the sort. Fantastic Four, of course. But it tells a story of Deadpool, of course, because this is his movie. Him trying to figure out what to do with his life post Deadpool 2. His life is kind of at a crossroads. He's trying to figure out how he can make his girl happy, and he hasn't really landed on anything. He's working at basically what's CarMax. And he's just living the normal life that a man would live, I guess you could say. Only for him to kind of get yanked away by the TVA from the Loki series, which, if you haven't seen the Loki series, you might be a little bit confused as to you'll really be confused about what's going on with the TVA, and why they want Deadpool in the first place and what their entire motive is. But you see him go back in time to 2018, prior to Iron Man's death, and he's talking to Happy Hogan about what he can do to kind of have some kind of purpose in the world. And Happy Hogan basically says, hey, you can't want to be an Avenger. You have to be the hero that people want. People have to need you for you to be a hero. And he kind of takes this to heart in the weird Deadpool way that, you know, anyone would really expect. So boom, we fast forward, he gets kidnapped by the TVA, and they say, hey, we need you to do this mission for us so that you can save your universe. And he says, well, I don't want everyone that I know to die, so tell me what I have to do. So he kind of devises this plan to get Wolverine, of all people, because he's like the anchor to their universe because of Logan. And he goes into like these different universes and tries to find a version of Wolverine that is most capable of going on this adventure with him. And he runs into this series of Wolverine from the comics, as well as ones that were kind of just created for this movie. Spoiler alert, he runs into one Wolverine that's played by Henry Cavill, who you may know from Superman from the DCEU films. And I'm not going to be mad at this at all, but I would actually love to see Henry Cavill do more, and I'd actually love to see him be Wolverine, because it just kind of works. It's stupid, I know, but it just works. But he eventually lands on this down and out drunkard of Wolverine, and he tells him like, hey, you're the last hope. We're going to do this to save the universe, and you have to come with me. Of course, he's like, no. And they kind of fight about it. as you would hope. They just fight. And then, I know I might have the story mixed up, but I don't really think it even matters. But they go to the Void, which is an area from the Loki series where all things basically go to die, from all different types of universes. They run into Chris Evans, and he's kind of covered up. So you think that it's just going to be Captain America for some reason. And he's like, okay, stand behind me. I'm going to save everyone. And Deadpool was like, okay, he's going to say the thing. He's going to say it. He's going to say Avengers Assemble. He does not say that. This man says flame on and turns into the Human Torch from the 2005 Fantastic Four movie. And I kind of leaned up in my seat because I did not see that coming. I didn't even know that Chris Evans was in this movie. So it was really great seeing that. The other cameos in this scene include Sabretooth from the first X-Men movie, Toad, a few other people, and it's hokey as I don't know what. It's all hokey, and I love it. I love how hokey this movie is. This movie does not take itself seriously, thank goodness. But they eventually get captured because Pyro from X-Men X2 and X-Men The Last Stand, he sucks all of the flame out of the Human Torch. They get captured. They meet our big bad villain, who is Cassandra Nova, who is the twin sister of Professor Charles Xavier, who she has a disdain for. But unfortunately, this movie does not show us exactly why. They just do more telling than showing, to the movie's detriment, because it just shows that she's really going to be the renowned Marvel villain. She's going to be here for a movie, and she's going to be out, and we're never going to talk about her again. But where her base is, which her base is a giant Ant-Man skeleton. They make the joke that Paul Rudd finally aged. Blah, 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 blah. And we find a lot more cameos here. We see just a lot of characters like from other movies. And it's a really nice touch. But overall, it just means nothing. They're meaningless cameos, but it's good that we actually get to see these people dress up and be these characters again. Or these villains, rather. Most of them were villains. But they eventually get tasked to, or they come up with this plan to, after they get the Human Torch killed, of course. They come up with this plan like, hey, we still have to save the universe. Can you help us out? And Cassandra Nova's like, yeah, I got this little device from a doctor. And she creates a portal. And she's like, yeah, I'm just going to help you. But you can also just figure it out. So they go on this journey. They find a version of Deadpool that's nice, and he has a dog, which is Dogpool, played by Peggy the dog. It's one of the ugliest dogs. I think it won like an ugly dog contest last year or something. But they just meet, and he's like, yeah, you can use my car. I have a Honda Odyssey. Which is funny because earlier in the movie, they were talking about how much better the Kia Carnival is to the Honda Odyssey. But they get in the Odyssey and they go on this adventure. They eventually fight. And the fight is caused because Wolverine is basically had it up to here with Deadpool in his mouth. And he kind of tells him about himself. He's like, hey, you lied to me to get me here. Now I'm in this situation because of you. You suck. You're never going to save your girl. Your outfit's trash. Your breath stinks. Blah, blah, blah. He's just going crazy. Deadpool is like, take that back. And they just kind of fight in the Honda Odyssey. And it leads to one of the best fight scenes in the movie. Believe it or not, they just fight in this car. And you just have these two superhuman beings that don't really die. They can heal. They have healing factors. And they're just fighting to the tune of oh man, I forgot what song is playing, but they're just fighting, and it's just great. It's a great fight scene. They eventually get captured because they're so worn out from fighting. You don't know exactly who captures them until they get back to their lair, and you discover that they were captured by some misfits, some Marvel misfits. They get captured by Elektra, played by Jennifer Garner from the Elektra movie. They get captured by Blade, who is played by Wesley Snipes. I had no idea, but that made me super happy to see, one, Wesley Snipes on screen, and two, Wesley Snipes on screen as Blade. We also see Daphne Keane from Logan, who's X-23, and we also see Gambit, played by Channing Tatum. And that was just always a weird situation. We'd always heard that Channing Tatum was going to be playing Gambit in some kind of role or some kind of movie. He's going to have his own movie or something, but it never came to fruition. It just kind of fizzled out. I remember that during Channing Tatum's hiatus, he did explain that he wished that he would have gotten that role. That kind of bummed him out and made him stop acting for a while. So it was so good just seeing him on screen again for like the 5th time this year, but also just him being Gambit. And you can tell that he's having fun with the role, even though it's just there to be a dumb cameo. He's just having a lot of fun with it. And they're kind of talking and they're like, we don't know what happened to the Human Torch. He's got to be somewhere. And Deadpool's like, oh no, I don't know what happened to that guy. He has to be somewhere. Just not telling them that he got him killed. But they devise a plan to capture or get close to Cassandra Nova. She can't use her powers if they use Juggernaut's helmet, because Juggernaut is also with Cassandra Nova. So of course that kind of gives us the hint like, oh, this is going to be a big battle. And a big battle is what we get. We get a big battle of our heroes now, Elektra, Blade, X-23, Gambit, Deadpool, and Wolverine against all the villains. And overall, it's a decent fight scene. I mean, it's fought to the tune of Bring 'Em Out by T.I., which I thought was a good little mix. It's like, why not? But they eventually meet up with her and they trick her. They have this plan to trick her. I don't know if this goes exactly how they planned it, but it works. She does eventually get weakened. She gets weakened by the helmet, and she sends them back to Earth, or their version of Earth, only to get told by Pyro what the entire plan was. And she goes through the portal, and she's like, now I'm gonna take over and do this, and I'm gonna destroy these universes one by one because I'm evil, and why not? So that becomes the next plan, is they have to kill Cassandra Nova or stop the world from ending, with the TVA kind of device that they have. So she sends this army of Deadpools, and we just get a bunch of crazy stuff happening. We get Lady Pool, Dog Pool comes up, as well as Nice Pool, played by Ryan Reynolds, of course, but he just has long hair, who does not have a healing factor, who actually dies in this battle. But yeah, they fight all these different versions of Deadpool, and it's a really cool scene because it's like, why not? It takes place on a bus. Matthew McConaughey voices Cowboy Deadpool for some reason, and it's like, I'm here for it. Why not? Just go crazy. And they eventually go to the machine that Cassandra Nova is trying to use to destroy the universes with. Deadpool decides that he's going to sacrifice himself to make sure everyone is okay, only for Wolverine to kind of break the door down and sacrifice himself as well. And their sacrifice is not in vain. Cassandra Nova does get killed. The universe is saved. And Paradox, who kind of devised this plan for Deadpool to go on and this journey, is captured by the TVA. And we also learned that Deadpool and Wolverine lived. So the stakes were super low throughout this entire movie, which I find hilarious because it's like, this was supposed to be the next big thing in the Marvel Universe. And I never feared for any character in this movie. But yes, so they kind of celebrate the fact that their universe is not going away. Everyone's kind of sent back to where they're from. Blade, I'm assuming, goes back to his universe. Same with Elektra, and I don't know if anyone knows where Gambit went because he didn't have a universe to begin with, but maybe he just disappeared. And we kind of fast forward, and everyone's happy. They're all eating dinner and cracking jokes, of course, and then the movie just kind of ends. And yeah, that was Deadpool and Wolverine. I sound a little bit. I'm not over or underwhelmed. I'm just kind of whelmed about it. That's what it sounds like. But this movie, as a spectacle, is something that I think should be seen in theaters just for the love of film and the Marvel Universe. Just go and see it. But I feel like this movie is made for a particular type of person. Not everyone is going to like this movie. Not everyone's going to love it. But I can see why people would dislike this movie for what it is. It's, as some people might call it, overhyped trash in a way. But myself, I really enjoyed this movie. I was able to, like I said, to turn my brain off and just enjoy it as a film. And I believe it's making a lot of money this weekend, or this week too. So definitely go and check it out. If you're a fan of Marvel, if you're a fan of superhero flicks, if you're a fan of Deadpool and Ryan Reynolds, even if you're a fan of cameos, just go and see this movie. It's definitely a Deadpool movie. If I got to give it any kind of rating, it'd be I'm going to go with an 8 out of 10. I was going to be kind of hard on it just because of what it is. It feels and looks like slop at times, but it's worth the watch. I got the part that, I got what they were trying to do. It feels like they were just trying to put this movie out to kind of satisfy fans of the Fox universe. Like I said before, it's definitely a love letter to that universe, and it even concludes in the credits with like bloopers and BTS of the older films. And it's like, oh man, like these films are what we grew up with. These films are a part of my childhood. I remember watching Blade for the first time and watching the scene of him in the club and just kind of getting goosebumps. Like, I don't know what this is, but I need more of this in my veins. I remember seeing X-Men for the first time and having a ball. I didn't really like Daredevil that much, but it was good seeing Michael Clark Duncan be Kingpin and Colin Farrell be Bullseye. Like, those were fun times. And the fact that this movie just kind of dialed it back with the comedy to kind of show its love to that universe is kind of great. It's good in my book. But yes, this movie's an 8 out of 10. Go and check it out. Why not? Even though I probably spoiled a good bit of it, go and check out the movie. Do yourself a favor. But with that being said, I think I'm going to wrap it up here. I do want to come back later and talk about a few other movies that I've seen and some that I will be seeing in the future. I know today is July 30th, and Trap, the new M. Night Shyamalan film, comes out this week. And I'm very much looking forward to it because I feel like there's got to be some kind of twist. And I am looking forward to seeing what that twist is going to be. So be on the lookout for some future episodes. Definitely. I do want to talk about one of my favorite horror films of the year, Longlegs. I've seen it 3 times. So I think I can finally come up with some concise thoughts about it overall. As well as Twisters, which is another movie that I enjoyed for the most part. I didn't see the original Twister until maybe like a week before Twisters came out, and I loved it. But yeah, I have to let you all know my thoughts about Twisters. So with that being said, thank you for listening. Thank you for being here and asking for the episodes and wondering where I've been and checking in. I appreciate it. I hope that you got some quality entertainment and got to get a more truthful opinion given to you about some of these films that are coming out. Like I said, I do want to talk about some more films in the future, so be on the lookout. And once again, just stay safe. Take care of yourself. Take care of your families. Yeah, I think that's about it. just be very careful out there in the world. Treat others with respect and don't live by fear. Please do not live by fear. I think those are some good words to leave off with. But with that being said, I'm your host, your editor, director, creator, producer, DJ, all that good stuff. And most importantly, I'm your first, your last, and your everything. My name is Dom, and I'll see you all later. Peace.